Glenn, tonight, Obama's fuzzy budget math exposed. Plus, union thugs coming out with their own day of rage. How's that going to work out? We've got a lot to cover. Let's go. Hello, America. The House passes the continuing resolution to keep the government open. 59 Republicans voting no after last week's showdown that ran right down to the wire. This resolution seemed to pass with a lot less drama. In fact, no drama. And while the Senate is now mulling over the resolution, the House is set to take over the battle over the budget. This battle over the president's budget is a symbol of the great divide in this country. Do we keep spending, or is it time to start slashing our way to fiscal sanity? Yesterday, we saw President Obama make his pitch for fiscal responsibility, pledging to reduce the deficit by over $4 trillion over the next 12 years. Was it a slam dunk or just another brick shot, as Senator Orrin Hatch called it? Well, let's ask his right-hand man, the president's right-hand man, Vice President Joe Biden. Looks like a brick shot. Okay, now it's time for you to decide. Here's how it all breaks down. Number one, last week's $38.5 billion budget cuts. Here's how we addressed them. Take a listen.
The first step in our approach is to keep annual domestic spending low by building on the savings that both parties agreed to last week. That step alone will save us about $750 billion over 12 years.
Well, there's a little bit fuzzy about that math. Here's why. $38.5 billion times 12 comes out to only $462 billion. I'm not sure how Mr. Obama came up with $750 billion. Fuzzy math, I guess. Number two, cut defense. The president applauded $400 billion in defense cuts over the last couple of years. He says he can make those savings again. Do I need to remind you about Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, shoe bombers, underpants bombers, mailbox bombers? Cut spending now? Are you sure? Number three, Obamacare. The president says his health care law is going to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion. Premiums for regular Americans like us are on the rise. Help me out here. How will Obamacare save the Fed's money? And by the way, $1 trillion, did you just make that number up? And number four, get this, reduce spending in the tax code. Listen how this is supposed to work.
The fourth step in our approach is to reduce spending in the tax code. In December, I agreed to extend the tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans because it was the only way I could prevent a tax hike on middle-class Americans. But we cannot afford $1 trillion worth of tax cuts for every millionaire and billionaire in our society, and I refuse to renew them again.
The key phrase there is reduce spending in the tax code. Tell me how raising taxes counts as a spending cut? Come on, Mr. President. We're not buying this fuzzy math. Obama math, after all. Do you think we're dummies or something? Let's ask Representative Paul Tonko of New York, a Democrat on the Budget Committee. How does the president's budget work for regular Americans, my friend? I'm trying to figure this out. He came up with $4 trillion, and for me, the math was more than just, it's kind of woolly, not just fuzzy.
Well, Eric, I think you have to look at the plan that was introduced by our Republican colleagues, the majority in the House. It was a raid on the middle class. It was cutting domestic programs and only domestic programs. All the concentration on cutting spending was done in that regard. It impacts our young with the education cuts, our seniors with health care cuts, veterans, working families, and small business. So it was not the sort of investment we need to move forward, and they were avoiding several of the other issues, like going after
Representative, allow me, I apologize for cutting you off, sir, but here it was. It was billed as it was going to be a specific deficit reduction plan. We thought we were going to be filled with numbers. We were going to go exactly where the cuts, we were going to see exactly where the cuts were being made. Frankly, the only cut that we can sink our teeth into, that we can understand plain as day, is the defense spending cut. The rest of them seem to be, arbitrary $1 trillion numbers thrown around.
Well, No, I think what you have are a defense spending cut of $400 billion that he has suggested would be part of his plan, but also he avoids that further spending that comes with tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires and corporations that are offshoring jobs, they're outsourcing jobs, American jobs, and he has said that he will close those loopholes, and he will also avoid those tax cuts that would have been an expenditure. It's spending on money.
But sir, you got to stop right there. You have to stop right there. Closing a tax loophole, you're counting that as a spending cut? How?
No, I'm not counting that as a spending cut.
Well, he certainly did. He certainly did. He certainly did.
But I'm saying when we're spending on millionaires and billionaires and don't have the dollars to do that, by giving them a tax cut, that was the wrong thing to do. You're only,
Representative,
to me, I think what he's going to do is drive
when you allow
here.
someone to keep more of their own hard-earned money by lowering a tax, you're not giving them anything. You're not spending more. I don't see how you make that, how the left always makes that leap.
Right. You're giving revenues away that you simply cannot afford to give away. I think what we have to do is balance this budget. The president moves to address the deficit reduction by $4 trillion, and the way you do it is by looking at all of our choices out there. What they were avoiding with the alternate plan was looking at millionaires and billionaires who have not provided the trickle down that everyone anticipated twice over in the Reagan years and in the second Bush presidency. And what we're saying here is let's work so as to invest in our middle class.
I could have sworn I heard you say we should balance our budget. Is that what you just said?
I think that we are moving in that direction with this plan, and certainly we have to remember that unemployment is driving the deficit. What we see here is a new calculus coming out from Mark Zandi, who is the advisor in the presidential campaign for Senator McCain, and he just suggested that 1.7 million jobs would be the job loss with this proposal if it were to be adopted in our House, a Republican plan, and as many as 900,000 jobs in the first year. So over 3 years to lose 1.7 million jobs, you're just going to drive the deficit even deeper.
Do me a favor, before I let you go, we're going to lose your satellite in a minute here, but the $38.5 billion, by the way, which President Obama fought tooth and nail before agreeing to it last Friday night, $38.5 billion, he said over the 12-year span it's going to be worth $750 billion. Please help me. I can't figure the math out. It's fuzzy.
Well, I think what he does is calculate certain indexes that will produce that number. We're going to, obviously, as members of the Budget Committee, will review all of this. But look, this is a raid on the middle class. There's no mistaking it. They end Medicare.
Representative,
they end Medicare.
I'm a math guy. I'm a numbers guy. I follow the money. I don't find any way 38.5 times 12 comes up with 750. It just doesn't add up. It doesn't happen.
Right, Eric, I'll tell you, we will review every one of the numbers, but let me tell you that I cannot stand for a program that ends Medicare and requires our senior citizens of every vintage, of every decade here, to spend out of pocket. We're going to give them $8,000 toward an insurance coverage that's going to cost probably $20,000. That is a raid on the middle class. We end Medicare with this proposal. We reduce Medicaid at a time when you're going to impact the middle class.
Last quick question.
And,
I'm sorry.
I think it's too much pain invested in one area of the population of this country.
Sir, how do we come up with $1 trillion in savings, deficit reduction out of Obamacare? I'm not sure how that works, where that number came from.
Well, obviously, there is a huge impact on small business and the profitability that can come, the competitiveness that is enhanced for them if you reduce their health care costs, enables us to grow the economy. There are jobs associated with the health care reform.
I got to tell you, sir, I got to tell you, these assumptions, these are very, very aggressive assumptions, and frankly, we were looking for something a little bit more concrete. We're going to say thank you very much to Representative Paul Tomka.
I think we'll review all the numbers, and we'll show where the savings are.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, sir.
My pleasure, Eric.
All right, you heard the president outline his fiscal plan for bringing down our nation's debt. He explained how he plans to reduce spending in the tax code. Take a listen.
They want to give people like me a $200,000 tax cut that's paid for by asking 33 seniors each to pay $6,000 more in health costs. That's not right. And it's not going to happen as long as I'm president.
All right, one of the key phrases used yesterday was reduce spending in the tax code. Someone's got to tell me how raising taxes counts as a spending cut. I can't figure it out. We heard Paul Tomka from New York trying to tell us, don't worry, that's how it works in Washington. And then he went so far as to tell us the $1 trillion that they accounted for savings in Obamacare is going to come from upside to businesses going forward not having to spend money on health care. Some very, very aggressive assumptions being made on the president's part, and frankly on the liberals in Washington's part as well. The other one was $400 billion in spending cuts to defense. Again, a very, very costly time, maybe a scary time to be cutting defense spending. And then the fourth one, the one that we all can't figure out, is how $38.5 billion times 12 becomes a $750 billion savings to the deficit. The number comes to 462. Maybe the president will tell us exactly how that's going to happen. All right, let's see what we have here. We have the debt clock. We have the debt ticking away, $14.375395 trillion, and spinning continues. Keeps going. Meanwhile, the lawmakers in Washington are spinning their wheels, too. Joining us now is Republican Congressman Steve King of Iowa. Republican Congressman, my concern here, sir, is $38.5 billion. We're looking for trillions and trillions of dollars in cuts. We come up with $38.5 billion. Please, is that enough, sir?
Yeah, that's not enough. We needed to draw a bright line, and we needed to stand on it. And I think the dividing factor here was who had the most willingness to face a government shutdown. I think that all along it was part of the strategy of Harry Reid and Barack Obama to push it towards a shutdown. I think enough things got put on the table that they wanted, enough taking off the table that we wanted, that they just couldn't come up with a good enough excuse to do what they already planned to do. So I think that's the biggest reason why we are where we are. The $38.5 billion, if that's what it really ends up being in real numbers, and not a lot of policy that we could have leveraged into this CR.
Representative, the American people out there are going, look, last Friday night we got down to 11:04 p.m., literally just a matter of hours before the government was going to shut down. The administration came out and said, don't worry, it's all clear. We're trying to figure out why is it all clear now. Why is $38.5 billion going to solve our $14.5 trillion deficit problem?
Well, it doesn't. And in fact, there's a pretty strong argument that our deficit increased during the period of time that we debated this greater than the amount of money we were able to cut. So even in the period of time of the calendar of the debate, I think we lost ground on the deficit. I think we've got to be a lot more bold, and we've got to be able to bring a budget that will get us to a balance in some time that we can actually hold accounting for. I had an individual yesterday who spoke at a breakfast I host who said, I have a 30-year-old son, and I don't know how I tell him that he can work his entire working life and be prepared for retirement before we get the budget to actually balance. What a depressing thing to think if you're starting your working career, or maybe the professional level of your working career, and know that you never get to see a balanced budget before you retire.
Then how did the Republicans let this thing pass at $38.5 billion, and how did it kind of sweep through the House this afternoon, and maybe probably going to sweep through the Senate in a matter of minutes? How does that happen? The American people are saying, no, 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 no. $38.5 billion is not enough money. We need literally hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars of real cuts, not these fuzzy math cuts that Obama pretends will happen over the next 12 years.
Well, I would have liked to have seen the $100 billion. I think that would have been a solid marker to put down in the time frame that we had. I would have accepted the $61 billion, but I also drew that bright line that said no funding for Obamacare. That's a $2.6 trillion outlay in the first full 10 years that it'll be implemented. And we should have stood on that as the biggest component that we needed to do battle with the president.
But you didn't.
Well,
but you didn't.
I did, but our conference didn't. That's
right,
correct.
right. But listen, I'm still calling your feet to the fire as well. You didn't, and you know we're trying to you're trying to attach it to upcoming legislation, but you didn't. It's still there. It's still there. But right now, would you vote? Right now, would you vote to let the debt ceiling be exceeded and I guess, I don't know, allow America to default on debts? What would be the process? Would you vote? Are you going to vote to raise the debt ceiling?
Right now, I would like to see the Tom McClintock bill pass, which sets up the sequence of priorities on the debt that we will pay and keep our bonds in order. But right now, I'm a no on a debt ceiling, and I'd like to see what they have for proposals. There are a few things that might make that attractive. One is an incremental increase on it to buy a little bit of time. But I want to attach Obamacare to it and shut that off. And there are a couple other proposals that look attractive to me, but I'm going to stand on Obamacare.
Give us a sense, sir. How does the House look? I mean, is there going to be a vote? What's your, you must do a straw vote, figure out what the vote would look like right now. Give us a sense where it stands.
I think right now that probably the debt ceiling doesn't pass. And yet, especially the freshman class has been conditioned to vote to increase the debt ceiling since orientation here. So that's part of the equation. And what they're being told, I don't know at this point. But I would be looking at the 87 freshmen to see where they stand on this as a real good barometer on what the Republican conference will do. And right now, I don't think it passes. But on the other hand, they've got some days to work on this.